And the breaking news that we're bringing to you right now is that the disengagement process in the Depsang and Demchok areas of eastern Ladakh have been completed as per the agreement between India and China when the leaders of the two countries had met in Kazan a few days ago. This is still a very, very preliminary pullback of troops and tents, non-permanent positions from the frontline areas of Demchok and Depsang. These are two friction areas that had resulted in a standoff-like situation between two sides for many, many years. The armies of India and China are now verifying the pullback on either side, the positions, the removal of infrastructure by each side there. Our sources are telling us that the disengagement that had been agreed upon in order to clear the decks for the resumption of patrolling in both Depsang and Demchok, which had completely stopped for the last 4.5 years, can now resume. Joining me live, Shivani Sharma, defense correspondent. Gaurav Sawant also been looking at this very, very closely. Gaurav, the disengagement, the very first layer of the attempt to normalize the border situation between India and China and Depsang and Demchok, we can confirm now, has been completed. There's a long road ahead, Gaurav, but this initial layer of disengagement, troop pullbacks, movement of tents, as had been agreed upon by the two leaders of the two countries in Kazan while you were there, has been completed now.
Shiv, that's the information that's filtering in. The first step has been taken, that eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation where tents and troops were barely a couple of 100 meters from each other, stalling the movement of each other's forces to, in India's case, to our patrolling points, in China's case, to their claim line. That disengagement has happened, and temporary structures that were there, like in China's case, they had some vehicles that were there and camouflage tents covering those vehicles. Now, they have been moved back some distance, but this, as you very rightly pointed out, is just step one, disengagement. There is still no de-escalation because whether it's armor or artillery or larger number of troops, they remain very close to each other, and India continues to insist on equal and mutual security, and that's a very critical step, equal and mutual security. And then step 3 would be de-induction, which is still a very, very far cry from the situation that exists right now. So 50,000 troops from the Indian side and the Chinese side remain in that area, though they are no longer in eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation. Temporary structures are being dismantled. Yes. The structures that have been created post-2020 in terms of defenses, trenches, movement of men and material, stocks where they were located, all of those still remain.
All right, Gaurav, stay with me. Shivani Sharma is also with us. She's just back from Ladakh, where she's had a first-hand view of some of those areas where the disengagement is taking place. Shivani, tentative, cautious, good news that the disengagement, insofar as what has been agreed upon between the two countries for this limited purpose, has been completed. What happens next, Shivani? The two sides will now figure out how to resume patrolling, I assume.
Shiv, now when the disengagement is completed, a cross-verification is to be done, and then a schedule for patrolling will be worked upon, because the situation is completely different to 2020. And now the patrolling schedules will be worked upon. Once again, the frequency of patrols, the coordinated patrols, and what would be the timings and the ratio of these patrols will all be worked upon by the Indian Army as well as the PLA. And very soon, in next 2 days, supposedly, the first patrol will start. And this will be a very good news, Shiv. We broke the story last Monday. The timeline has been 1 week when the dismantling started happening. And now it is being told that this engagement is completely done from Demchok as well as Depsang plains. So now the patrolling will start, and assumingly, a new schedule, a new charter for this patrolling will be worked upon by both the countries. And to start with, the first patrol will begin in next 2 days.
Okay, Shivani and Gaurav, thanks very much for getting us that immediate input from the ground on the disengagement being completed. That's definitely a milestone, albeit a small milestone, because of how many more milestones are left before the two sides can actually talk about any meaningful de-escalation of tensions on the border. I want to tell you that here on this show, as we decode the reality check of what's happening in Depsang and Demchok, I will have with me Colonel S. Dini. He's a former commanding officer of an infantry unit that served in Ladakh, in fact, at the Pangong area during the standoff. General L Nariman is a former defense attaché in India's embassy in China and one of India's best-known experts on China and military affairs. We'll be going to the both of them in just a few minutes to help us understand what exactly has taken place in Depsang and what the reality of the larger challenge ahead really looks like. But first, let me show you some images. The India-China disengagement is complete in Depsang and Demchok, or nearing completion according to our sources. The disengagement between the Indian Army and the Chinese forces in both these very, very stubborn friction points has progressed and is about to wrap up. We are told by some sources that it is already done, and there may be a statement of some kind confirming this very shortly. All this means that coordinated patrolling is going to happen very soon, with the disengagement process set to conclude within the next 24 hours. As of Monday, 80 to 90% of the pullback had been completed. Today, we understand that it's done. Troop withdrawal, removal of tents, removal of any structures that had in some way or the other challenged the movement of either side's troop patrols. However, the 4 buffer zones in the friction points that began in May 2020, that is the Galwan area, the Pangong area, the Hot Springs Gogra area, those are still going to be under discussion moving forward. So this disengagement we are talking about now has happened in the northern part, that's Depsang, and the southern part of Ladakh, that is Demchok. High-level talks, as Shivani just mentioned, are anticipated at the core level in Leh to outline patrolling protocols in these buffer zones once the current disengagement is finalized. Remember, there has to be a cross-verification by both sides of each other's movements to make sure that each side has done what it has committed to doing. The verification will be carried out physically, aerially, using satellite imagery, using UAVs. The process is rooted in a mutual physical verification of what each side has actually done. It's not going to be based on any kind of trust on the other. Let me first show you some pictures. Before I bring in Ankit, I want to show you some pictures of what the disengagement actually looks like. If you look at these pictures that India Today's Ankit Kumar in our OSINT team has accessed from Maxa, these are the first images that came in a few days ago of what the disengagement looks like, whether it is the Demchok area or whether it is the Depsang area. Images taken from Maxar satellite over the course of a couple of days clearly establishes that at least those frontline pullbacks of troops and tents has taken place. So I want to bring in Ankit Kumar to understand a little better how we need to look at this. Ankit, these satellite images are pretty dramatic because they do show very clearly, as you've mentioned in your story, that immediately after that agreement between India and China, things have visibly changed on the ground. There appears to be a pullback, a removal of some tents and structures there. But as you've also mentioned in your story, and this is the bigger reality check, Ankit, that there are many more things to remove of a permanent nature, which are a few hundred to a few kilometers inside, across the border, which will presumably remain there. So the question now is, how much has actually moved in this disengagement, Ankit?
Well, Shiv, we have reviewed satellite imagery as recent as Saturday. So the most recent satellite imagery, high-resolution pictures that we have reviewed, that are from Saturday. Based on what we have seen purely on satellite imagery, we can say that most of the forward and semi-temporary kind of places, those places have seen very visible disengagement. Before the recent de-escalation, Shiv, there were two kind of friction points. There was Depsang and Demchok in the north and in the south. In between there was Pangong, so there was Gogra Hot Spring, there was Galwan, the point zero of the June 2020 conflict between India and China. Now, what is different, what makes Depsang very different is the presence of PLA in Depsang is very scattered. There are very permanent sort of structures. There are permanent camps. We have even seen a heliport kind of structure very close to north of Petrol Point 10. So what will be interesting, especially in Depsang, whether those kind of structures, will they remain there or will they be demolished? We do not know for sure. We have two examples. We have seen what has happened in Finger 4 area. The semi-permanent structures that we had seen before the disengagement in Pangong So area, some of those were removed. But in this case, there are Chinese roads, there are camps, and they are very permanent kind of structures. We do not know what is going to happen to those. So we will have to kind of see and how things pan out, because Depsang in this case is very different to what was happening in Galwan. Remember, there was hardly any PLA permanent presence in Galwan Valley.
Yes.
Pangong So, we had a very kind of in Pangong So there was Chinese roads. But there was no eyeball-to-eyeball situation. But now Depsang is becoming very tricky because the number of PLA structures over the past 4 years have really gone up. And the nature of those structures appear to be very much permanent. So it is something that we will have to keep an eye on.
Okay, Ankit, thanks very much for getting us that input, that this is an initial layer of a pullback, but there are more entrenched establishments and infrastructure and encampments by the Chinese, which suggest that there is a permanence to what the Chinese are intending in Ladakh. So let me just show you another picture. These are pictures put out by imagery analyst Damien Simon, who goes by the name Deterrence on social media. He's put out this map, which actually gives you a sense. Blue is India, red is China, which gives you a sense of the kind of permanent structures that exist along the line of actual control, including in the Depsang area in the north and the Demchok area in the south. You know, you've seen the tentative disengagement of troops on the actual border, right on the LAC, but these dots you see on this picture, on this map, really show you how many permanent structures have actually been built on both sides. And removing those structures is not part of the current agreement, and therefore it's going to be a far bigger challenge to actually de-escalate and then de-induct. What happens, for instance, to all these permanent structures is a big question that we need to ask. In addition to all these questions, the big questions I'm asking right now is that when will troop patrols resume on both sides? Now that the disengagement is completed, the first phase of the disengagement, when will troop patrols resume on both sides? Number two, will there be new joint border protocols between India and China, given that the old protocols have proven to be pretty much redundant, with the two countries nearly coming to war over the last 4 years? Number three, tents and troops have been pulled back as part of this tentative agreement. But what about those permanent posts a few kilometers inside that I just showed you on the map and that Ankit was referring to? Those numbers have increased in the last 4 years. Will India and China dismantle that permanent infrastructure at the line of actual control? Could that be something that's on the table for discussion going forward? Question number 5, can the Indian Army deter any Chinese U-turn on disengagement? Remember that China is a country that has very little predictability and almost zero trust as far as India is concerned. So what kind of deterrence will ensure that the Chinese do not make a U-turn on this disengagement? And number 6, will India and China shift their firepower from the front? Many of those dots you saw on that map represented not just permanent establishments, troop accommodations, heliports and things like that, but also firepower, tanks, artillery, radars, missile sites, etc. When will those be moved back? And until those are moved back, can this really be called a meaningful disengagement is the larger question. So no over-exaggerations or exuberance. This is a sober look at what the reality is, even as we welcome a disengagement between both sides in Depsang and Demchok. Let's go straight to our big experts now to talk about this. First to General S L Nariman and Colonel Denny we'll go to right after. General Nariman, the disengagement in Depsang is, as we said in our last conversation, welcome news. Any forward movement as far as India and China is concerned is welcome news. But the reality of the matter is that the Chinese side, the Indian side as well, but the Chinese side especially, has accelerated the building of permanent structures, permanent infrastructure in Depsang, Demchok, and in the other areas. And the current agreement doesn't talk about the removing of those.
Good evening, Shiv. Thanks for getting me onto your show.
Thank you.
You see, 2-3 things. One is, just before I answer your question in a second, first thing is I heard you referring to these areas as buffer zones. I think I actually agreed upon temporary moratorium on patrolling in these areas. So these are two different connotations that we need to be looking into. The use of word buffer zone is conveys something else, which is not a correct way of expressing.
Understood.
Second is about your question about the firepower, the permanent structures, etc. See, the disengagement typically was meant to pull the troops back to a little bit so that they don't come face to face, and then things could escalate if it gets heated up a little bit somewhere in between. So this is the first process that has been completed, as we spoke on the show sometime earlier this week.
Yeah.
The issue is this, that the first step is being completed at this point in time. The permanent structures, the pulling back of the firepower, the missile structures that have come up, the permanent structures that have come up, that I am sure will be part of the de-escalation process, and that will come up for further discussions in the next stage. The patrolling to recommence, I think it can recommence at any point in time once this verification process is completed. And I'm sure the modalities have been already worked out in that agreement, which had been signed earlier. And I'm sure it'll start very, very soon. Maybe in a 2-3 days time, we'll be able to start that patrolling from both the sides. What has been told is that it is a coordinated patrolling, which means both the patrols will not come face to face. And that is a good sign, basically, because then there is no chance of escalation, face-offs, and then escalation of those face-offs thereafter. So this is the first step, which has generally been completed. We'll have to wait for the second step to start, and then it's a good step forward. Like you said in your initial remarks, we need to be careful. We need to verify the pullbacks that have happened, and then get on to the other processes for the step 2, which has to come up anytime soon.
Can you tell us what this verification process will look like in terms of the the instruments that the Indian Army and the Chinese Army will be using to verify? It isn't being left to each other to put on paper that they've done so and so, pull back, etc. This will actually be a cross verification exercise, General, with satellites and UAVs and things like that. Can you tell us how it's done?
You're very right. It can't be just left to people say, I've done it. So therefore, you need to have other processes. You're right. The UAVs will be used. The satellite pictures will be used. The physical verification of these things definitely will be carried out before we take a step forward. As I have been saying in all the programs, trust but verify. We need to verify those things which have happened on ground. And I think that is the step that we need to be taking. And I'm sure people are already taking those steps.
The third question I want to ask you, General, is that are there going to be new protocols now? Because, the last 4.5 years has pretty much changed everything as far as the rules of engagement between the two sides are concerned. And at the very least, it has shown that the existing protocols are not enough to prevent a situation of this kind. Even though we know very well that it was China that violated those protocols. Does this mean that the two sides will now have to evolve some special new protocols to follow?
You see, the protocols are already there. As I've been saying earlier also, the protocols are already there. You find agreements there. You find the standard operating procedures there. All of them got violated on one fine day in 2020. So therefore, bringing in another new one may or may not be a very wise thing to do, because it all depends on how the other side actually respects those. So what I think we need to do, it has already been done, I am aware, that the existing protocols have to be revisited and see how they need to be tightened up, and that process was already on. As far as this particular issue is concerned about the coordinated patrolling and other things, those are the protocols which already come in with this agreement happening. So I don't think we need to go for more new protocols to come up again and again. I think we need to tighten up the existing protocols which are existing, plus take on board the agreement that has been done and the acceptance of certain rules and regulations which has been agreed upon in that agreement.
Final question, General Narasimhan, is that, considering that China has proven to be a country that is not reliable, as a result of which, all these verifications really need to happen, is there some deterrent in the last 4 years? Has there been some kind of a message that the Indian Army has been able to send to China, which says that, if you go back on your word, or if there are U-turns on agreements, then there will be a price to pay? I'm asking this in a simplistic way, but I mean that even in this agreement now, this latest agreement for this disengagement in Depsang and Demchok, if there is some kind of a rethink or a U-turn at the Chinese level on what has been agreed to, is there some kind of a deterrent on the Indian side, sir?
It is like this. When these protocols have been agreed by both the sides, we expect them to be followed in letter and spirit. Okay. In the last 4.5 years, one point has gone continuously to the Chinese side, that the status of the border will determine the status of the relationship. This is a standard line which has been conveyed to them, both at track 1, track 1.5, track 2 level. All levels it has been conveyed in every meeting that has been conveyed. So I think the unified kind of stand that we took and the perseverance that we practiced in last 4.5 years has, I think, paid the dividends as we see it at this point in time. But be rest assured, should there be a U-turn by the Chinese, I am sure our troops are very well there. They are very well deployed. And then I'm sure they'll take care of the situation if at all it comes.
In fact, I agree, because I don't think that the situation is ever going to be normal again. I don't think trust is ever going to be a real factor. It's going to be about mutual deterrence and perhaps the assurance of the consequences in case any such U-turns are even contemplated. General S. L. Narasimhan, always a pleasure speaking to you and getting your wisdom on this complicated issue. I thank you very much for being guest number 1 on this topic. Thank you very much, sir. And now bringing in Colonel Dinny, who also offers perspective as someone who until just a few years ago was a commanding officer on the front line. So this allows us to zoom in to the LAC to tell you about what will actually be happening on the ground now. Colonel Dinny, you've been in this situation, during the standoff, so you know what the atmosphere was like between the Indian side and the Chinese side. Could you give us a sense of what it would be like for the army forces in Depsang right now as they carry out this disengagement?
First and foremost, Shiv, the first thing is that they would be cautious, because as General Narasimhan also mentioned, it's the trust, but verify is the mantra. So yes, the troops will be cautious, and I dare say that it will be cautious from both sides, because there is no trust at this point of time. So whatever actions earlier, which used to be done as a matter of routine, would now be done as a proper operation. Each thing will be done in a manner which will be planned to the last T, and it will be done in a manner that there is no scope for any ambiguity. So whether it is moving back, what is the time to move back? Which all infrastructure has to be taken from there at the first round, which will be done in the second round, and then finally, how do we move? Because it has to be synchronized with what the Chinese also is doing. So I think there will be a lot of planning, and I'm sure the people on ground, they will do that. I mean, because it is something which if they are all professional soldiers, they know exactly what to do. And the key point is, it will be a reflection of how the Chinese, take the things forward, because there will be an agreement which has been reached, but on ground to implement it, it will be done in a manner which, because this is where, if you remember, in Galwan, the Chinese backtracked, and what happened there was something else. So therefore, I would say that it will be done with a lot of caution, but in a professional manner and in sync with what the Chinese does.
We know that directions are being sent from the the military headquarters to the units on the ground, the corps headquarters, etc., to the units on the ground on both sides, as far as this disengagement is concerned, Colonel Denny. But on the ground in Depsang, and I'm just asking this because these are questions that our viewers would also like to know about, is would the sides be talking to each other in Depsang and Demchok during this disengagement? Would there be like a hotline between the units there?
Definitely. See, what happens is that all along the line of actual control, there has always been a system of contact at the tactical level, at the battalion commanders level and at the brigade commanders level. More at the brigade commanders
and
level.
You've also been in touch with your counterpart on the other side during when you were there.
Through the brigade.
Okay.
Yes, through the brigade, we were in touch. So therefore, for example, if there is a violation, a transgression happens, immediately a call is given to the other side that this has happened. Now we want a flag meeting immediately. So then they reciprocate the date and time is fixed. So there is a mechanism, as General Narasimhan was mentioning, within the existing protocols, that there is a mechanism to get in touch. So I'm sure that mechanism still continues to be in Depsang as well. So whatever we are doing and whatever they are doing, as part of the agreement, there will be mutual exchange of information that this is what we are doing right now. This is the number of troops which are going to go. This is the number of tents which are going to go. So those communication is definitely, I'm sure it will be happening at the ground level.
As a battalion commander who's been in a frontline position during this standoff, Colonel Denny, can you tell us what this kind of disengagement does in terms of lowering the temperatures between the two sides? Can you give us a realistic picture of that? The pullback of troops, removal of some of these tents which are in somewhat of an eyeball-to-eyeball situation. It appears that it would bring down the temperatures because, there is a visible movement. But as a battalion commander, can you tell us, can you confirm that that is the case? It does bring down temperatures and diffuses things somewhat?
Oh, absolutely, Shiv. See, when you look at it, these frontline troops, right along the line of actual control, they, no matter, what kind of structures they are not, having the same kind of, I would say, amenities or the comfort as would maybe even in the forward bases, because these are after all temporary bases. So as a commanding officer, you don't want your troops to be exposed to the elements, which is one of the biggest challenges in these areas for a prolonged time. So in that sense, when both sides disengage, as a commanding officer, you are happy that your troops are now coming back to a much more secure place where you have a better command and control, and where the troops' health and other issues can be taken care of. So therefore, that adds to the overall lowering of the temperature, because all said and done, Shiv, when troops are in close contact for a prolonged time, you never know what goes into their mind and where somebody can. Of course, at this point of time, there is no physical contact because there is no patrolling. But once the patrolling starts, at that point of time, it is very difficult to control the emotions of a soldier. And I say it goes for the same thing goes for the Chinese also. To control all the people who are going for patrol, the officers, young officers who are going. So it's very difficult. So as a commanding officer, one is happy that the troops are coming back to your fold, where you have better command and control, you have better facilities available, and they can be engaged in much more productive training and much other activities. So yes, definitely the temperature will come down in that sense.
Colonel Denny, you started answering the question that I was going to ask you next, so I'll jump straight to that, which is on the patrolling aspect of it. Some of the videos that came out during the standoff did depict, clashes and violence during those, patrols crossing each other in the Pangong sector where you served as well. As we talk now about the resumption of patrolling, and after this 4.5-year standoff in which it is very clear which side had violated protocols and which side had, very strictly obeyed protocols. We all know that the Indian Army didn't do that. It was the Chinese Army that did it. How difficult is it going to be to resume patrolling? The reason I'm asking is because, our soldiers, our officers will have to now go on those patrols again. But absolutely, the Indian Army is a highly professional force. Everyone has complete faith in them. But it's going to be difficult getting back to something where the trust in the other side has completely gone.
Oh, absolutely, Shiv. I think in this whole process of normalization along the line of actual control, if you want me to name one issue which is the most critical and yet which is the most challenging, I would put it as the patrolling which is going to happen now. And especially in the area what is generally commonly referred as buffer zone, but I also call it as no patrolling zones.
Yes.
So what happens in the no patrolling zone is going to dictate how the peace and tranquility along the line of actual control will sustain itself, because that is where this entire problem started.
Correct.
So it is not the infrastructure which was created in the depth areas and in other issues, but the physical contact between the troops led to this crisis or to this conflict. So I am concerned that once this starts again, how do we overcome that so that those incidents do not come back again. There I understand that there is an agreement now being worked out wherein prior information would be given, the number of troops would be restricted. So and also there will be no overlapping of patrols. Like if once the Indian patrol goes, then on the same day the Chinese will not come, and vice versa. That I think will, to a great extent, will reduce the tension. But definitely, as an officer, as a soldier, infantry soldier, as I mentioned, it is not you're not dealing with machines there. You're dealing with human beings.
Correct.
And human beings at that altitude, they with extreme pressure and stress, both from the environment and otherwise, can behave in a very different manner. And one has seen it. It is not because of any lack of professionalism. And I do agree that even the Chinese side, to be very to be fair to them, it is not that they also behave in an unprofessional manner. They do behave in a professional manner, but of course they have to do what they are supposed to do. What are they told to do? That a counter is being given by the Indian side. So what I can say is, Shiv, the patrolling in the no patrolling zone would dictate how much peace and tranquility, or how long this can sustain. That is going to be the key, I think.
And that is the point at which we now stand, because with this disengagement tentatively complete, the next step will be on the resumption of that very challenging area of patrolling. And as Colonel Denny has just pointed out, that is going to be trickier than it sounds. So we'll have to see how the two sides actually navigate it and resume patrolling in especially those 2 points, but also the buffer zones or the no patrolling zones of the other friction points that began in May 2020. Colonel Denny, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for giving us that very gritty, granular take on what it's going to be like navigating the next few steps. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
In fact, we've got some related breaking news after the disengagement at the line of actual control in Ladakh's Depsang and Demchok. The focus is also in the eastern sector, that is in Arunachal Pradesh. A major defense exercise is currently underway in the eastern sector. Talks with China are on to ease tensions in the eastern sector as well. Remember that India has eased up on its dominant positions in the Yangtze Asafila area of Arunachal Pradesh as almost like a quid pro quo for what has happened in Depsang and Demchok, even though India had dominated some areas in Ladakh as well. So a synchronized diffusion of tension in Arunachal Pradesh and Ladakh, but Arunachal Pradesh is a big focus area now. The Army, Navy and Air Force are activating assets in the eastern sector where things are continuing to be a little sensitive. So India's focus on the eastern sector continues. Remember, India and China are now negotiating border patrolling protocols in the eastern sector. Remember, whether it is Sikkim, whether it is Arunachal Pradesh, there have been violent clashes between the patrols of Indian and Chinese army troops. Chinese troops have been captured on video being thrashed by Indian army patrols on multiple occasions in both Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh, and therefore China has requested for discussions and talks to negotiate border patrolling rights. Patrolling rights in Tawang, Yangtze are currently under discussion. These are areas where the Indian Army has taken positions of much greater advantage over China-occupied Tibet. India has been currently blocking the Chinese army since a December 2022 clash, putting China in a great position of disadvantage. And that's one of the reasons why China had become quite conciliatory in the run-up to this agreement on diffusing tensions in eastern Ladakh. Remember, there's also a big joint exercise called Purvi Prahar. Purav is east in Hindi. That has kicked off. That is going to be kicking off from November the 8th this year. The Army, Navy, and the Air Force will be activating a tri-services exercise in the eastern sector in November called Purvi Shakti. It's an infantry combat exercise that is scheduled. The Indian Air Force's fighter aircraft, transport aircraft, helicopters will all be part of it. So this is a tri-service muscle flex that is taking place in the eastern sector. Shivani Sharma, bringing us these details, is with us. Shivani, obviously, Purvi Shakti, this exercise is symbolically significant because the eastern sector has very much come into play when we're talking about Ladakh as well, because it is in Arunachal where the Indian Army's dominant positions are known to have actually brought China to the talks table for the Ladakh diffusion. But Purvi Shakti is a big exercise because the focus on that sector is going to be very, very important now.
Shiv, this exercise called Purvi Prahar will commence from 8th of November and it will continue till 18th of November. So 10 days of joint military training between the Indian Army, the Indian Air Force, and all the major air bases will be activated, including the Kolkata, the Hashimara, the Panagarh base out there, the Kalaikonda base. So all the major assets like Su-30 MKIs and the Rafales, C-130J aircrafts and the helicopters of the Indian Army also will be participating together in this combat drill. And yes, like you said, the focus has been on Arunachal Pradesh, Sikkim too, along with the talks that have now turned into an agreement in eastern Ladakh in Demchok and Depsang. But yes, as the diplomatic talks were on, the military talks were on, they were also on and they are still going on for Arunachal Pradesh, also especially the friction points like Yangtze, where we saw clashes between India and PLA in December 2022. And the whole focus remains there. We've seen the Army Commanders Conference happening there. We saw how during Dussehra, Defense Minister Rajnath Singh was there in Sikkim. And again, he's traveling tomorrow for Diwali celebrations to Arunachal Pradesh, Tawang. So all the focus and all the activities that we see around Arunachal Pradesh, they are emphasizing on India's focus on eastern sector too, along with their talks of disengagement in Depsang Plains and Demchok. So this 10-day long exercise will be a major, mega military drill. The jointness between the forces will be there and emphasis on the eastern sector too.
Shivani, thanks very much for getting us that crucial input as part of our larger coverage on what is taking place in Ladakh. We'll keep an eye on what's happening in Arunachal Pradesh as well. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh headed to Tawang for Diwali. Another symbolic message there as well.